officer in place. You do not have to do it in a hurry. Everybody's casual here, so do not let them, especially my presentation, affect that. For those who I haven't met before, I'm Michael Kiefer. I'm the Executive Director of Annual Conservation. And just want to thank all of you for all of your support over all the years and your support for tonight's event. We greatly appreciate it. But so many of you have been coming for so long and supporting us in so many different ways. There is a slide up there that you might have missed, but 86 members or supporters of the RMC have supported it for over 20 years. And through that history, 1,000 people have supported 10 years or more. So, yeah, that's you. And you should applaud yourselves because we would not be here without your support. And we greatly appreciate it. Just to kind of anything in my throat all night. I'd like to take a moment to thank our sponsors. We have Satchuruna Foundation, who sponsored the catering tonight. Doug Fout, who, as he would say, sponsors the booze. Helen McMahon sponsored all the other drinks tonight. And then Bobby Lawrence and Rockley Foundation, they didn't know this, but they sponsored our heat for the And then I'd like to thank Andrea Courier for the beautiful table arrangements. And thanks to our sponsors' contributions, it means your donations tonight go straight to our work. And so nothing tonight of your donations is going to any of our expenses. So give them a real now I'd like to acknowledge our board, our president, Sandy Sarabian, our vice president, Mike Dow. You can tell they like each other now on opposite sides of the room. Our secretary, Sue Southard, is in Florida tonight, but the best secretary ever, but I didn't say that out loud. No one can take it. It's a thankless job. And then Dougie's acting as our interim treasurer as well. So, and then our rest of our board members are Andrea Courier, Tim Dunn, he's in the room. Peter Porter, the one-man band, is not able to join us tonight. Kathleen Higgins is in California, but still very much a part of the organization. Jack Potts, in New Mexico, unable to join us tonight. Helen McMahon, who is in the room. Rita Morenzi. Fritz Reuter is on a plane, otherwise he'd be joining us tonight. And then Jonathan Sherberg has become a Florida bound every winter. So thank you to the board. Without their support, we wouldn't be here today as a staff. Now I'd like to thank Matthew Frost, BRMC's Assistant Director. If you haven't met him, if you haven't go on our YouTube or social media, that is kind of here. Melanie Wentworth I don't think was able to join us tonight, but she's our building caretaker. So if you come to our speaker series or winter lecture series or other things at the Mountain House, you can meet Melanie. And lastly, I'd like to thank 170 volunteers this past year, $1,900 to help us do our work. And tonight there's one last special thanks. Kobe Sami, the student of William & Mary's Institute for Integrative Conservation, did a year-long project. And so what is sitting on the table with the QR code is his project. It's a toolkit, Conserving Your Land. And it's great for landowners, but it's also great for anybody because it's an educational tool. And when you read it, you'll be able to read it. And so for those who don't work in conservation easements or carbon sequestration in the field in those areas, it can be very complex. And Colby did a phenomenal job to simplify it so that you can get your feet wet in understanding some of these things, and then you can dig much further into it on your own with your own interests. So big shout out to Colby. He's a student who's taking his midterms, otherwise he'd be here tonight. And now I'd like to introduce Raven, my president.
Good evening. I'd like to echo what Michael said and thank you all for coming. Without your time, without your skills that you provide us, and without your financial backing, we couldn't do what we are doing. We need your support. And often people ask me, so what do you do at the RMC? So I'm going to take just a couple of minutes to give you some metrics that we're pretty proud of. The Town and Country Nature Walks is something we started recently, and we did 11 walks this year on 5 different properties. We worked with 6 different homeowners associations and 2 community-based organizations. Our winter lecture series and our speaker series was tremendously successful. We hosted 9 conservation organizations, researchers, and/or foundations. Our core education program saw a 54% increase in participation this year, and we conducted 63 different public educational programs with 1,839 participants in our youth outdoors program, our nature camps, our hike with the naturalist, lecture series, etc. Our staff and volunteers have put over, I think Michael might have said this, over 400 hours of stewardship over at Leopold's Preserve, helping with the removal of invasive, invasive species, thank you. If I don't get up here and forget a word, then I'm not really up here talking. And they also do trail maintenance and other activities over there. But this year we've been really trying to focus on membership, and we're happy to report that our membership is up 16% from the last annual event we had. And Michael did tell you about our long-standing members, so just know that once you become one of us, you'll be here for a while. So financially, we continue to be very conservative. We do not do deficit spending, so we try to earn the money before we go ahead and spend it. Grants make up about 50% of what we bring in, and the rest is brought in by donations, memberships, and there are some public programs that we charge for, but most of them we are doing because we've received a grant, and so we're offering those for free. We did set a very lofty goal for tonight, which is 40,000. You might have seen our thermometer up there. We're at 35,800, and this is my point in time to just put a little plug in that on your table, there's another QR code, and if you feel so inclined, we will not say no to an extra donation tonight, just letting you know. So, I do have to recognize also the executive directors. I mean, the board can come up with some really great ideas, but those 2 are the workhorses. So if we get another quick round of applause for Michael Kiefer and Matthew Frost. But just so you know, the board, we meet officially 5 times a year. We have 5 official meetings. We have started this year doing some working groups and found that if we meet in those off months with the people who are interested in a topic, we get a lot more time to dig in and talk. So that's been working really well, and I think that's been helping us with membership pushes that we've been talking about. In getting ready for tonight, I always kind of look forward, like what are we, where are we going? But you can't look forward without looking behind. In 1994, a small group of individuals established the Bull Run Mountains Conservancy to protect the Bull Run Mountain through education, research, and land stewardship. Primary focus was on preserving the unique ecological features of the mountain range by maintaining and advocating for the land around it. One of the core founders of this organization carries on a family vision of preserving and protecting this land. She was instrumental in leading this organization through her 30 years as a board president. Her vision, contributions, and insight continue to be invaluable. Although she has taken a step to the right, we know that she's still available, however, that she can assist. During her tenure, she facilitated our acquisition and renovation of the Mountain House. Since 2015, we've had a landing zone, a place to meet, a place to have speaker series, a place to gather, a place for Michael to keep all the snakes. So tonight, Andrea, could you join me up in front real quick, please? Andrea, could you join me? I'd like to, we had a local artist create a rendering of the Mountain House as a small token of our appreciation for all that you have done and continue to do to protect this area. All right, Michael, back to you.
All right, now for the main event. Laura Greenleaf. I got her bio here, but Laura Greenleaf has been part of the BNMC organization for quite a long time. Her son, Leland, I know there's a slide of him up there with my oldest boy, Sam. And so we're really happy that you could join us today. But Laura Greenleaf has been the leader of the Virginia chapter of Darksky International since 2013, delivering over 40 educational presentations, serving as the hub of advocate networks, providing support to Virginia's sky conservation efforts, and assisting policy initiatives. She's a Virginia master naturalist and a lifelong conservation advocate who currently works for Richmond's James River Park system as a coordinator of invasive plant management. Yeah, lifelong commitment there beyond. Having founded the James River Park System Invasive Plant Task Force in 2015, Laura grew up in Clark County on the Blue Ridge just north of Ashby Gap. After college, she returned to the area and lived primarily in the Crooked Run Valley. Though her original career was in social work, she was always actively engaged in local conservation efforts as a volunteer. She served on the board of the Citizens for Fauquier County in the early 2000s, worked for the Virginia League of Voters as the Northern Virginia coordinator before moving to Richmond in 2007. She lives in the city of Richmond, just south of the James River, with her husband, her 17-year-old Leland, 2 cats, but is back home on parts of the mountain, or at Paris Mountain every night.
It's amazing to be here, and I'm so grateful for this opportunity. There are familiar faces and names, and with that montage that was rolling earlier, I'm having my own montage of memories. When I came back to this area, I spent a lot of time in the place. My post-college years, kind of a fixture at the rail stop and Fiddler Screen, specifically the bar. Did a lot of hiking on Nightscape Mountain, and I remember the early efforts to conserve the lowlands. And then later, I was here at least one annual meeting in the early 2000s. As Michael mentioned, my son attended one of the camps. We took him to the Halloween safaris when we could. And now, my life now in Richmond, I'm very connected. I have wonderful colleagues and friends at the Richmond Natural Heritage at DCR. So went on a Native Plant Society hike a couple of years ago here. And so it's kind of, it feels a little full circle. I apologize ahead of time for a length of presentation incompatible with an evening and candlelight and alcohol. I hope nobody nods off. Also, just be warned, I'm spend a lot of time on lighting itself, which might seem a little beside the point, but we cannot become advocates we can't effectively advocate to mitigate and reverse the trend of light pollution without really understanding lighting. So that's why it might seem a little bug now. All right. So my main goal this evening is to inspire and encourage an expansion of what we mean by conservation generally and specifically here in the Bull Run Mountains to include a natural night and dark starry skies for the sake of flourishing ecosystems and healthy wildlife habitat, but also because darkness is or should be intrinsic to rural life and our countryside. It's only quite recently in human experience that we've ruptured our relationship with the night. Since the earliest life forms emerged 3 billion or more years ago, the Earth's 24 cycle of light and dark, its seasonal patterns, and its lunar cycle have been driving evolution. And once we arrived on the scene, we looked to the stars to figure it all out. Calendars, agriculture, navigation, and religion science. In the late 1700s, there was whale oil for public lighting, and 100 years later, gas lamp lighting came on the scene. But lighting was difficult and costly really until the mid-20th century. So this is really just very recently in human history that we've been experimenting on ourselves by transforming starry skies into this for most of the world's population. So tonight, just a brief overview, preview, want you to understand a little bit about the organization, Darksky International, obviously the basics of light pollution, Lighting 101 as I mentioned, why it's relevant to everyone, not just people who care so deeply about the natural world, its impacts on ecology and wildlife, some good news about what's happening here in Virginia and how you can be a part of that. So I am a volunteer, and the Virginia chapter is not a standalone organization. We don't have any kind of independent status. I'm basically just the lead contact for the Virginia members of Darksky. Darksky International used to be known as the International Dark Sky Association. It was founded in 1988 by astronomers who recognized the threat of light pollution to science, to astronomy, and it's run by a pretty small staff out in Tucson, Arizona, but it relies very heavily on volunteers. And the mission has really greatly expanded. Darksky International restores the nighttime environment and protects communities from the harmful effects of light pollution through outreach, advocacy, and conservation. So clearly, it's really built out from that original astronomy focus. And we do this through these 3 main components: public policy, improved lighting itself. Darksky has never been anti-lighting. We work with the lighting industry through education and outreach, and through conservation. And this flagship conservation program is also the most visible presence, I think, for Darksky International. Just recently, the New York Times had an interactive feature on the most recent Darksky sanctuary to be approved, the Isle of Rum off the coast of Scotland. But from the darkest places on Earth to communities that are right in the thick of light pollution, we have these different designations, so it's not something that's just for the remaining pristinely dark places on Earth. It's about making the nighttime environment a priority. Another visible presence of Darksky International, we have these different certifications, different approvals, including the places, but there's also the lighting itself, and so this is the recognized third-party certification for Darksky approved lighting. You sometimes see things like Darksky friendly, terms are kind of bandied about. Most of that's really just greenwashing. This is the seal of approval you want to look for. So Darksky addresses all of the consequences of light pollution, but increasingly people are very broadly recognizing how it affects them, regardless of whether they really care that much about being able to see the stars. Outdoor lighting is a fundamental component of our communities and neighborhoods that affects us in so many ways, but has just not been given the attention it deserves, and so often it's done so badly. And a current example of this is that in the past 6 months, I've been coordinating and facilitating a statewide coalition that is focused on improved street lighting. So it was precipitated by LED streetlight conversions in Charlottesville and Norfolk. And it's a group in Norfolk, Citizens for Responsible Lighting, who really drove this effort with their own advocacy work down there. And it was not, this was absolutely coming from a quality of life, the impact on the community. And so we are working on Dominion Energy because we don't back down from the challenge. And when we get it right, like in this example, lighting enhances the comfort and appeal of our surroundings. We do have the capacity for thoughtful, intentional lighting practices and design, but we have to commit to rethinking our relationship with lighting and doing it differently. Light pollution is one of those things that you think you know what it is, you know it when you see it, but basically at the most neutral level, it's simply the alteration of outdoor light levels with artificial lighting, which we sometime in the literature will refer to as ALON. Unfortunately, much of our lighting is completely wasted, including approximately 40% or more that we are simply dumping up into the sky, as this image from the International Space Station demonstrates. We sometimes use these images to suggest progress or to make a distinction between different societies, but this is just pure waste. And unfortunately, new research that incorporated observational citizen science data is documenting that it's accelerating even faster than we thought before, as much as 10% globally every year in some places. This used to be a projection. This was from 2001, the Atlas of the Artificial Night Sky Brightness, but now we're here. This is 2025. And the increase in light pollution nationwide tracks with the changes in technology and the reduced cost of lighting, the building out of our electrical grid, including rural electrification, and of course just the growth, expansion of suburbia. And it's both gradual and rapid. Only the people who are really paying attention or maybe stayed in one place for decades really notice this change. But I am increasingly hearing stories from people I moved to such and such a place 30 years ago, and I could see, that there's this palpable sense of loss of the erosion of the night sky. There's that color display basically reflects the Bortle scale, which is a 9-level numeric scale that was developed by an astronomer to classify the quality of night sky, the night sky brightness of a particular location, based on the visibility of celestial objects and the interference from light pollution. So class 1, darkest skies on Earth, and then it just gradually washes out until you get to that inner city sky. And this is Virginia. And we might think of ourselves as having dark skies. Unfortunately, we really don't have any pristinely dark skies, even in the Allegheny Highlands, which is a place that my family and I have been going regularly since 2013. They're not. Even there, we see sky glow from the Shenandoah Valley. And it's not just a problem. We used to sort of think light pollution is a problem for cities. You just drive in the country and it's a dark sky. But this is Harrisonburg. That's what we've done to the Shenandoah Valley. So it is really ubiquitous and universal. But that sky glow is typically what people associate with light pollution. The washing out of the stars because of the light that we've thrown out into the atmosphere. But that's one manifestation of light pollution that we experience. Here on the ground, we also encounter light clutter, which really is the outcome of how we've approached lighting for generations, which is haphazardly, without good planning, without design, so we just have layer after layer of lighting, and it becomes a hazard in itself, and it's also, frankly, just plain ugly. Glare and light trespass are the most direct ways that light pollution affects everyone, and this is where the primary complaints come from with regard to lighting. It's often the reason people contact me, because of a personal experience that people need help with this. And the trespass, light intruding beyond its target onto private property into homes, usually that's coming from a direct source like a street light or a neighbor's floodlight, but when you have really bad sky glow, and you can attest to this living in Richmond, especially on overcast nights, the sky can be so bright that it's also makes the interior of your home artificially bright. And this is where the health impacts come in for people. So we're all familiar with the circadian clock, circadian rhythms, those natural cycles of light and dark. That's been the primary environmental cue for our behavior and biology and physiology throughout evolutionary history. This is what we evolved according to, these natural day-night cycles and light levels and spectrum. Our eyes have this non-visual function through specialized photoreceptors in our retina that communicates to the master clock in our brains that then sends messages to all of our body organs and systems. And we know this phenomenon as the circadian rhythm, which artificial light at night disrupts and desynchronizes. The most obvious result is sleep disorders, of course, and what has gotten the most attention and what people are most familiar with is blue light from screens. There's a lot of talk about the harm that comes from that. But there is a growing body of research that is exploring the associations of light pollution with diseases such as breast and prostate cancer because of the influence of melatonin suppression on tumor growth. Darkness is the trigger for melatonin production. Light, particularly the spectrum light, suppresses it. And so there are a lot of limitations to the research. There's much more research needed. But this is something that is getting increasing attention, as well as other health issues like diabetes and obesity, depression, even research into autism and dementias. So our own good health depends on dark nights. And the American Medical Association has been vocal about the role of artificial light at night and its potential health impacts. But their earliest concerns about light pollution, which date to statements from 2009, focused on discomfort and disability glare, particularly for older drivers. We intuitively know that it's a bad idea to shine a bright light into someone's eyes, but that is exactly what much of our lighting does. And, that's funny because I have an aunt in Los Angeles who always mentions that she can't go out at night, she can't drive in the dark. It's like, it's not dark in Los Angeles. The problem is actually the lighting, which causes the iris to contract, right? Our eyes then are only taking in that bright source of light, and our highly sensitive, low light, night vision rods in the retina that are responsible for scotopic vision become impaired and even completely disabled. And then as we get older, and we don't have to be, this starts really in our 30s, every structure in our eye starts to change, and that includes cataracts and the thickening of the lens. And all of the changes in the structures of the eye only worsen the effects of a bright light on our vision at night. And so that's where that discomfort glare, that urge to squint or look away can become disability glare, and this becomes truly a safety hazard. So glare, as we know it, is one form of light pollution, and one feature of badly designed lighting. So where does the light pollution come from? What kind of lighting is causing it? And first and foremost, we have this issue of lighting that's simply unnecessary. That it's not serving a useful purpose, that there was no good decision making going into why that light is there. And it can also include light that's just used when it's not necessary. So maybe it serves a purpose at one time of night, but it doesn't need to be on all night, like lighting up empty parking lots. It's excessively bright, high light levels, which has gotten worse and worse and worse. And just as we become accustomed to not being able to see the stars and we become accustomed to light pollution, we become conditioned to these increasingly bright environments. How do you know if the light level's too high? The standards are set by the Illuminating Engineering Society. And it is not unusual for light levels to be double or triple what they should be. So, at their very worst, a luminaire can waste more than half of the light it's producing. And then because we get into this fixture design, and then also when you have a light that's unshielded, where maybe it's vertically positioned, it's aimed outward, like the light in that. Saw lots of these coming up 17 today, where the light is just going directly out and up. Or the globes down there below, and then there's this issue of light that is too blue. It has to do with the spectrum of light, which we'll talk about a little bit more later. The lingo that we have relied on in the past to describe the design of lights is cutoff. So we would talk about full cutoff fixtures or partial cutoff fixtures. The idea is that you didn't want light being emitted above a 90-degree horizontal line through that fixture. And this is a nice, useful visual depiction of what we mean by bad lighting and better lighting and ideal lighting. But this is actually outdated. So since 2009, the way lighting is classified is called, it's very handy, as the mnemonic, BUG. Backlight, uplight, glare. And this is information you really have to have at a minimum to know whether or not you've got decent lighting. So it literally is looking photometrically at where light is being emitted from a fixture and giving it a rating. So it's a 0 to 5 rating for each one of those. And you really want a 0, nothing higher than a 1 for uplight and glare. So really important information when assessing lighting plans. The color of light. I'm sure everyone is, if you buy a light bulb for your bedroom and you want a warmer light, you know you're going to look at the label and look at Kelvin. Okay? So this is really just a blunt instrument to describe the color of light. And we know that we like warmer light, like candle light in front of you. All the lights in the parking lot here are warm light. And that's really the 2000 up to about 2700 range that we're most comfortable with. And that's where our old high pressure sodium orange street lights hit, okay? And there we are. So the standard for dark sky has wobbled a little bit in the past years, but it's capped at 3,000. You don't want to be any higher than 3,000. And increasingly, we are trending lower. And interestingly, there was just a study, Boulder, Colorado, is going to be redoing their streetlights. That happens to be the home of the premier lighting research policy and design firm Plant and Associates. They did really good surveys, pilot projects, and what did everybody want? 2,400 Kelvin lighting. But this is like I said, this is a blunt instrument. So it's not really telling you the proportion of blue light. It's really just the appearance and the outcome. If you want to dig really deep and really know how much light is being emitted at those short wavelength in that blue spectrum, that's spectral power distribution. And this is a nice little profile of 2 different lights, one that is very blue white, an LED street light of the worst sort, really, and then the light on the right that has 0 emissions in that blue spectrum. So again, Kelvin's very useful, we rely on it, But if you need more information on that and you're really trying to restrict blue light, generally in ecologically sensitive areas where there should be no blue light, which we'll get into a little bit more, you need this level of photometric information. So blue light, we used to be 10, 12 years ago really focused on fixture design. And I had lots of slides showing bad fixtures and shielded fixtures. It seemed as though we could fix things by shielding lights. But then at that time, LED was coming in. And what's the problem with LED lighting? Nothing. Inherently, it's all in how you use it. We are 15 years in with this technology and still mostly getting it wrong and ignoring the lessons that we've had along the way. To start with, that is not a bulb. LED is a type of solid-state lighting, and it's fundamentally different from earlier generations of lighting. It's similar to the semiconductor devices that enable our phones and our computers. So it's really individual, very small light bulbs that fit into an electrical circuit. So it is inherently intensely bright and glare producing. And that is, we've always known this, we've always known we needed to address that, but nobody, the decision makers weren't paying attention. LED does have fantastic advantages. It doesn't produce heat because it's not incandescent. It's long lasting, it's durable, and of course, it's highly efficient. And that efficiency got all the attention early on. So I had someone tell me, a conservation leader in Virginia, tell me back in 2012 that LED lighting was going to solve light pollution. Because it's efficient, and efficient is good, and it's going to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. And everybody jumped on that, and they're still jumping on it. A lot of streetlight conversions are driven by departments of sustainability looking to reduce greenhouse gases. But instead, what happened is what often happens when stuff is cheap, we use more of it. And that's what happened with LED lighting. And also, the earliest generation of LED lighting, there was a big efficiency gap between the blue-white lights that was heavy on that short wavelength spectrum and the warmer light. So it was cheaper to produce blue-white light, and that's why we ended up with a lot of 5,000 Kelvin lighting, which was really awful. But we closed that gap. So the gap is now really negligible. You don't have to have, there's no excuse for this blue-white light. But what happened is with efficiency, it was lighting more stuff, more lights in general, at brighter and brighter levels. And what was the real tragedy of LED lighting was the failure to use adaptive control, because it is singularly compatible with control systems for dimming, curfewing, and dynamic lighting that responds in real time to changing conditions, like traffic levels. And it is happening in different places. It's always been happening, but overall, lighting all along in the past dozen years or so, if LED lighting was going in without adaptive control, it was obsolete on installation. That we understood that you should at least have it equipped for adaptive control, even if you weren't going to be using it at that time. Gradually, we finally started catching on. There was a lot of backlash to some of these streetlight conversions, including one in Davis County, where the backlash was so strong that they paused, they put a halt to the conversion and redid the whole plan. And when they redid the whole plan, they warmed the lights to a warmer color correlated temperature, and they dropped the lumens, the overall output. They dropped the lighting levels. I don't know if they used dimming or not, but the outcome of that actually saved the city more energy and more money than the original plan with the brighter lights, because they were simply using less of it. Conservation versus efficiency. So that's the bad news. So what is the solution? What is the antidote? And as I said, we have this focus on fixture design, and then we got really hung up on the blue light. We always knew that there were all multiple aspects to better lighting, but a few years ago, Darksky developed, really just looked at it comprehensively and holistically and came up with a value-centered lighting policy. And what underpins the value-centered lighting policy are these 5 principles. And this is a partnership with the Illuminating Engineering Society. So this isn't just dark sky. This is the lighting industry itself. And first, is it useful? Does it serve a purpose? Is it justified? Secondly, is it targeted? Is it just lighting what it's supposed to in terms of the design or shielding? The level, again, is it an appropriate light level? Is it just at where the IES? The IES has standards for everything. So if it's a parking lot, if it's a particular roadway, if it's a police station, they have those standards. Is it controlled? Is it taking advantage of that adaptive control so that you can do it overnight when traffic levels drop, so you can turn it off completely if it's not needed, and then the warm color again. And this is just kind of a visualization of that, of those qualities. And all of this is very consistent with what we know and understand about visibility. This is actually safer, more effective lighting than glaring, overly bright lighting. Because what we know about how our vision functions and how we serve visibility is that it comes down to contrast, like the black letters on a page that I'm reading, and adaptation, our ability to adjust to varying light levels as we move through this. That is particularly important for places like this, as compared to, say, New York City, where you might drive through a village or town and into the countryside. You do not want to be blasted with really, really bright lighting and then transition into darker areas. Your scotopic vision is not engaged. So I feel that this is so much more important for rural areas in particular to not be over lighting. And interestingly, we also know that you do not need roadway lighting at 35-mile-per-hour zones or less, because our headlights do the job. So in terms of driver safety and transportation, you don't need it at all at that point. Amazing resource, Federal Highway Administration Lighting Handbook. It's 200 pages long. I can't say that I read it word for word, but it's a fantastic resource. And it clearly states that you get diminishing returns the brighter and brighter you go. You know, it's a little bit like, I mean, the metaphor is, for me, it's like seasoning, or, right? Like you don't just add more salt or whatever seasoning you're using because something's going to taste better. It can end up tasting worse, it can end up hurting you. Same with medication. We know we have dosages for medication. We don't just take more thinking we'll feel even better or we'll get better sooner. It's the same thing with lighting. There is a point at which you're not getting any more benefit from it. So Plant and Associates did research with Virginia Tech Transportation Institute back in 2013 and came to the conclusion that light level was the worst predictor of good visibility based on stopping distances. So again, no excuse. Does lighting prevent crime? So much of our bad lighting is justified by the argument of safety and security. There has been no further word from the National Institute of Justice since this report. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, and sometimes it can actually be counterproductive. For instance, in a circumstance, let's say, again, in a rural area where you light up a property in an isolated area where there's no natural surveillance, you're attracting attention to that target, and you're providing the very lighting needed to break in or to vandalize. Which is why there's something called dark campus policies. And these, I think, sort of started in Canada. They were hard to trace online where there were actually dark campus policies until I discovered that there's one in Culpeper County. Culpeper County Public Schools have used a dark campus policy for years and years, and they really like it. So one of our member advocates out in Highland County got in touch with the director of facilities, or whatever his position is, and learn about how they do this. There's lots of education, there's lots of communication, but they're basically turning off virtually all the lighting when the schools are not in use. And it actually has had the effect of obviously saving money, but also preventing vandalism. Because if someone sees a light come on, like a flashlight, for instance, or something like that, they will call them and notify them, the neighbors of the schools. So if they can do it in Culpeper County, they can do it in Fauquier County. And then crime prevention through environmental design, another partnership with Darksky. They have some shared messaging, but SEPTED always says that lighting should not cause light pollution, that you don't want glare, you don't want to create deep shadows. This is not effective for these purposes. And these are just some classic examples of how people have demonstrated this effect. So you look at the picture on the left, you see the guy in the crosswalk in an incredibly glary light. And you think he's gone in the second picture, but actually he is not. He is actually standing underneath the light pole. He's still there, he is hidden in that dark pocket. Another demonstration, flood wall packs. The person that is now visible was in the first picture. Again, they're concealed in this dark shadow that's created by the glare of that light. So again, so much of this lighting is incredibly counterproductive. Just takes us back to those 5 principles. I have cards here, you're welcome to take one. And what does this look like in real life? I always pick on acorn lights. I hate acorn lights. They should be phased out. They have been phased out in some places. People claim they're historic. They're not historic when you've got some crazy bright glaring LED source in there. And if you want a pedestrian scale light that feels whatever, old-fashioned, quaint, lots of great options, and you can see how they're different. You're not looking directly at the source of the light, it's warm, it's shielded, etc. So all good. Oh, and how we have an example right in Loudoun County, Hillsborough, a streetscaping project from a few years ago. Those lights, they wanted to do 2700 Kelvin, and the only reason they did it is because it was going to really throw off the timeline of the project, because it was like a special order situation, but they also dim overnight. There it is. And how much nicer to sit on your porch with that light in front of your house than some of those others. Other examples, wayfinding lighting. Just lighting walkways and stairs instead of overhead lighting. Sea turtle lighting on the right. Flagstaff, I was trying to think, where is this? Flagstaff. Flagstaff, Darksky community, I think the very first, lots of resources for enforcement. It's not dark, right? But it's very appropriately lit. Sports fields, there's an approved, Darksky approved sports field lighting. Also, you can see that that field is quite well lit. You can also see that it's not putting out any uplight. And you can see the difference in the color of lighting for the visitor pedestrian areas. One of my favorite examples is Grand Canyon National Park, Darksky Park. When they were on provisional status, they had a lot of lighting to retrofit, because there was just a lot of legacy lighting. So that's the lodge, a lodge. You notice that you can't read the sign because of the light? After the retrofit, after the new lighting, everything's appropriately lit, and you can actually read the sign because you don't have this unshielded wall pack or floodlight over there. Tucson went through a streetlight conversion in 2019, and they dim their lights overnight. They dropped it from 90% full power to 60% full power. And they also, they were able to measurably reduce blue light emissions and overall lumens. So this is a really important long-term goal to reduce overall lumens to reduce light pollution. Okay. So we know it's not good for us, and surprise, it's what's better for us is also better for the natural world. And which is why, as a parent and as a master naturalist, done lots of education over the years. This is, I started incorporating darkness and natural light into those basic components that we always talk about of what animals need for habitat. Ecological light pollution, in the same respect, takes these different forms. Sky glow, where you're washing out the celestial compass, and direct sources in the environment as well. And then there's just light, natural ambient light, artificially increased light levels. And this is relevant when you think about what happens in the natural area preserve, because you have a natural area that's very strongly protected, but the light pollution doesn't observe those boundaries. And I just recently read about the Santa Monica National Recreation Area in Los Angeles, and the sky brightness has been measured at 20 times natural levels. That's the sky brightness. The vertical illuminance is about 30 times natural levels. So yes, you have a protected area, but you have degraded habitat all the same. And it reverberates throughout the trophic levels, throughout ecosystem. It doesn't just affect animals. There's less research on plants. A lot of research on plants is horticulturally based for commercial reasons. We know, anybody who did like a 7th grade science project knows that plants respond to light. They have way more photoreceptors than we do. It influences flowering, it influences dormancy. And so fitness, desynchronization, phenology, the timing, when things happen, the important matches between the insects and other animal life that depend on those plants. When you start artificially lengthening day and disrupting that, it's going to cascade throughout the food web. There's some research out of Purdue on trees in particular. Again, it's the idea that you're artificially extending the day length. And there's a lot of pictures of trees like that, where they've hung onto their leaves next to the street light, even though they've dropped on the other side. Because daylight, it's not, a lot of people think, oh, it's just temperature changes that are influencing leaf drop. And actually, it's photo period or day length that is triggering that. But this can delay dormancy. So if you're delaying dormancy, you increase the potential for cold injury. There is variation by species, so some species are more sensitive and susceptible than others. And it depends very much on the spectrum of light and the intensity and the duration of the exposure. But as for the animal world, we do focus on nocturnal species, but it affects diurnal species as well, and all animal groups. So what we see is that it alters their foraging behavior, their communication, predator-prey balances, breeding, therefore reproduction, actual biological development, their navigation, and with navigation comes, of course, migration. And it does this, again, through that artificial extending of day length and photo period. Just as it does with us, it interferes with dark-adapted and low-light vision, disrupts their circadian rhythms. For animals, for species that navigate by the celestial compass, that's just gone. And then there's phototaxis, which can be positive or negative, being attracted to or repelled by light. And this is where it gets tricky, because yes, many species are particularly sensitive to blue light, as we are, but it doesn't work that way for birds. So red light actually disrupts birds' ability to orient and navigate by celestial compass through Earth's magnetic field. And actually, the researcher Travis Longcourt has said that for ecological purposes for wildlife, the only truly wildlife-friendly light is the one that is never installed or is turned off. So it's a little tricky to say that lighting is wildlife-friendly. There are places that really should not have any artificial light at all. Sea turtles are kind of the poster children for wildlife and light pollution. ocean, we know that the mothers need dark beaches, dark coastlines to nest, and that the hatchlings, they emerge at night and they orient to the ocean, to the luminance, the starlight and moonlight of the ocean, except that they are disoriented by coastal light pollution and will reorient to lighting, and they are then, of course, subject to predation, to being hit by cars, and just to they have to get to the ocean really fast after they hatch, so they simply they will die from that. Which is why we have turtle safe lighting. And alternatives to lighting, like again, embedded roadway lighting. Why put up lights if we don't need to? So the major animal groups, this is a depiction of major animal groups and what percentage of them are nocturnal. And then the size of the marker denotes the number of species in the group. So of course the biggest blob are insects, because they're most of the Earth's biomass, and many more insect species than anything else. But that's the amphibians on the far left. Most of them are nocturnal. And they're also, very exceptionally sensitive, not able to adapt to habitat disruption because they're dependent on water in their life cycle. And what we've seen with frogs is that they exhibit reduced calling in lighted areas and reduced movement and foraging. So it's not hard to figure out what happens. Lose fitness, again, they're not doing what they need to be doing. You're losing reproduction. So there's an individual impact and there's population level impact. Same with salamanders, who depend upon returning to their home pool for reproduction, and has been shown to, of course, interfere with that navigation. And physiologically, there's been lab research on frogs. The frog on the left is sort of the control tadpole, allowed it to be in darkness for the dark phase. And on the right, that tadpole was exposed to artificial lighting during the dark phase and a delayed metamorphosis. So this is the circadian physiology of the animals. So again, insects are everything. The world lives on insects. And light pollution has been implicated in their precipitous decline. The effect of the insects being drawn to the light, so is the vacuum effect with the light, that phototaxis, the attraction to the light is just literally sucking them out of the environment. When that happens, you've got a loss of food source, right, for the predator species through mortality of the insects themselves, but also because then they're not where they need to be for the predator species. If you have light-averse bats, that they're not going to go to those lights to feed on those insects. They're just not going to have a meal. Fireflies, small but charismatic, another great spokes insect for light pollution, which interferes with their bioluminescent communication. Somewhat obvious. Dung beetles. So there's been research into dung beetles in South Africa. And the study compared the dung rolling performance of beetles in a rural part of a northern province with that of beetles in inner city Johannesburg. And they found that those beetles exposed to light pollution had to change strategy for navigation because they navigate by celestial compass, and they would rely on artificial lights instead. So that affected, of course, survival and the population strength, and also the very important ecosystem services that they provide. Oh, and I mentioned moths. So moths suffer greatly from light pollution, mortality, obviously, but that particular moth was shown in a state of quiescence, where they will encounter light sources and just drop or sort of drop from exhaustion after getting caught and captured in a light source. So this is a study that was done in Switzerland, Scientists were investigating interactions between plants and pollinators and how that was affected by artificial light. They set up several rural meadows with LED street lamps and compared the differences in the number of pollinators and the frequency of their visits. So they focused on the cabbage thistle. They counted 62% fewer insect visits to the plants in the lit meadows. 29% fewer pollinators in the control plots, the dark control plots, and it resulted in a 13% reduction in fruits on these thistle plants. And sometimes, long ago, someone said to me, but the bats love my security light. They feed at the security light. And that is true. Some bat species are light tolerant and will feed at lights, but other species are light averse. And it tends to be the species that are already, all bat species are threatened, as we know, and who suffer from white nose syndrome here. But that kind of creates winners and losers. So the light tolerant bats are going to have a better chance at survival than the light averse bats. And they forage differently. So there was a really great example of this years ago in London, where Philips, the lighting company Philips, was able to design lighting for a public park pathway for people that would keep light off the river, because a particular bat species was dependent on foraging above that river. And they found a solution for both the bats and the people. But bats are really very much affected by light pollution. Will also, as with some other mammals, delay their exit from their roosting spots. They will emerge later than they should when there is lighting near those exit holes. And then birds. A few years ago, the World Migratory Bird Day focused just on light pollution and did so for very good reasons. Most of our species in North America are migratory, and most of those migrate by night. And the result is a very high mortality rate, so to the tune of about 1 billion birds a year. And you'll see the beams from there was intervention, so now they turn them off for periods of time to basically release the birds from this capture effect. So there's that. There's the capture of the attraction to the light, where birds that need to be conserving their energy on these incredibly long journeys are instead caught in these beams of light and will often simply die from exhaustion. Or there's the effect of striking lighted buildings. And then there's the loss of the celestial compass, because they are navigating, again, by celestial compass. So there are multiple effects. It's important to know that buildings don't have to be skyscrapers to cause a problem, like the McCormick Conference Center in Chicago, where in 2023, 1,000 birds in one night died in a collision with this building that led to changes to the building's lighting as well as the glass itself. So it was a combination of interventions and they reduced the mortality by 95% with the changes with that particular building. But it was a surprise to me to realize that a lot of songbirds migrate at a much lower altitude than I thought, 500 to 2,500 feet. So even relatively short buildings can be perilous for migrating songbirds. The U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service a couple of years ago launched a multi-sector summit to address this twin threat of building strikes, glass buildings, windows, the whole kit and caboodle, as well as light pollution. Darksky is a partner with that. They are still okay, as far as I can tell, saw an email today. And they have specific working groups on light pollution, on lighting, and on coastal and offshore lighting in particular. So with all that in mind, there are so many reasons to change how we light our communities. And people always want to know, what can I do? And at the simplest level, we can just be good role models of good lighting. You can just take a second look at your own home and how you use your outdoor lighting. Darksky has really nice, helpful tools for that. and influence neighbors, influence your neighborhood. But beyond that, and I know like the people in this room go way beyond, right, the immediate in their conservation efforts. You can support your dark sky park. So you might not know this, but we have 5 dark sky parks in Virginia, and one of them is very nearby, Sky Meadows State Park, which I will always think of as my own backyard. I was there with my parents the day that park opened, hiked there so much in the years when nobody was there. Very different now. But you'll notice in that picture of Sky Meadows that that's not the setting sun, because that is to the southeast. So that's light pollution, really from Marshall and Warrenton and Manassas and so forth. But dark sky parks, they get that status, they have to keep that status. It's reviewed every year. They can become provisional status. It can be revoked if the night sky degrades beyond the threshold to be a dark sky park. There are lots of components to being a dark sky park and requirements, including programming and education and being open to the public. But what Sky Meadows needs in Rappahannock County, well, I haven't been in touch with them lately, they've got RLF out there, but you've got to have strong partners in the communities surrounding those dark sky parks to change course, because we're only going in one direction with light pollution. And they were popular. And DCR just came out with their new Virginia Outdoors plan, which is almost impossible to navigate. It used to be this nice like digital document, and it's now this like crazy story map thing that I cannot make my way through, but I did find this. And this was from the survey they did. Nature-oriented activities that people said were most needed. And the biggest piece of the pie, or competing with tourism or events, was some things that were open space based. And when you open up open space, it broke down into those activities in the list on the right. And stargazing and dark skies came in at 26% of respondents. This is what they want. And I was at Sky Meadows several weeks ago, just to quickly speak to the people who had come out to an Astronomy for Everyone event. I couldn't believe how many people were there, and I couldn't believe how far they had traveled to sit in the cold in a folding chair during a dinner hour. You know, this like, with little kids all bundled up. They were coming from Fairfax, they were coming from Alexandria, someone was from Arlington. This is good for the local economy, and it's conservation-based. Ordinances. Show of hands, does Fauquier County have a lighting ordinance? Does it work? Okay. It does not. Like, no, unfortunately, most ordinances don't work. At this point, they are all woefully outdated, and they way predate LED lighting, so they're kind of useless against that. And even aside from that, they're full of loopholes, they're full of exemptions, vague language, really hard to enforce. The ordinance is only as good as its enforcement, so you need resources, training, staff, the whole thing. But they're still important. It's an all-of-the-above solution when it comes to light pollution. We've got to be hitting it at every level, and we need better ordinances. Happily, Dark Sky just recently rolled out templates for statutes, and this is for the worldwide, so they were able to do this with really great experts involved. But we now have these wonderful templates that we can turn to advocate for better lighting ordinances in our communities. And I really, really hope that this will happen in Fauquier County, because if it can happen anywhere, it can happen here, and we've got to improve the local ordinances. The town of Vienna is doing it right now. Town of Vienna hired Clanton Associates, that premier firm out of Boulder, Colorado, to write their new lighting ordinance. So that's a great example right there, and they have resources online about that process. Do they work? They sure do. This is a dark sky community in Germany before and after enforcement of lighting ordinances, because it became a dark sky community. comparing Cheyenne, Wyoming, no outdoor lighting ordinance with Flagstaff, with a well-enforced ordinance. That's Flagstaff again. I liked it so much, I guess I decided to put it in place. Locally, lights out programs. DC now has a new reinvigorated lights out program. Hampton Roads has a lights out program. They're part of that street lighting coalition I mentioned. Northern Virginia Bird Alliance just launched a partnership for a bird safe campaign with Mountain Wildlife Conservancy and many organizations. So take a look at that. They're rolling out their spring migration messaging. And that all kind of overlaps with International Dark Sky Week, so it's a nice time to get that message out there and communicate with your civic groups or local elected officials. And don't miss this, although I still have not gotten there, but the Smithsonian, this doesn't tell you how much this matters to people and that this is not some kind of niche issue anymore. The Museum of Natural History 2 years ago, I think now it has been, they launched a special exhibit on light pollution. Dark Sky is a partner, and it's going to close at the end of the year. So if you haven't had a chance to get to DC, you might want to check that out. Email me anytime. I use my personal email address for all of this mostly, but I do have a Dark Sky address. Check out Dark Sky's website for resources. Our website, my website, is vintage. It is like circa 1998. It certainly predates my enrollment by a lot. So if you know anybody who's good at web design and would like a pro bono project, please let me know. It's really sort of a blog, but it's still worth taking a look at. And I just included a few more pictures of Sky Meadows. That's the Milky Way taken at Sky Meadows. The aurora last fall. And that's the sky glow that we need to take down. Thank you.
Any questions? Yes.
Excellent. A little bit of a different question. Much of the electrification that was done was don't face low power in public life. What progress has been done on that front and the insurance front that we always hear about? Light up parking lots at night. Besides the shielding and all the measures that we do there, has there any progress in being able on the base load power and insurance side?
That is really outside my area.
My area too,
I would have to like ask.
Anybody in the room know?
So the insurance question though is interesting because a lot of times localities will come back and say, we can't get sued, we don't want to get sued, we don't want to get fighting. But if you're meeting the IES level, then that's it. You've already met your legal obligation. And what's interesting is there's a database on legal action, law cases involving lighting and light pollution, and something like 95% have to do with too much lighting. It's like light trespass, and so I think it's a bit of a red herring, that whole insurance thing. But in terms of the bigger question, I would have to ask somebody.
When Windy Hill builds in the plains, they expect some enormous lights. And they implicated insurance as the reason to do that. And I was very worried about that because we're a rural little town, and I asked them to point us to where it said they had to have that lighting, and there was nowhere. And I even asked a couple insurance agencies, so we got them to pull the poles down by half, get the light down by half, and get it a color temperature that was better.
That's fantastic. And that brings up a very important point, that never assume that the people making lighting decisions know what they're talking about. Because they probably don't. Dominion Energy does not have any lighting professionals on staff. I have now had one virtual meeting with them, 10 of them, 9 of our coalition. They don't have lighting expertise. They force that onto the locality. Oh, the locality is supposed to tell us what they want. Well, the locality thinks that Dominion are lighting designers, which they are not. And the locality doesn't have the expertise. So so you don't know what you don't know, right? And they'll tell you something, and you're like, what do I do? But that's the smart thing to do. It's like, show me. Show me the evidence. And you could poke a hole in it.
I just wanted to say, I came to one of these meetings a few years ago, and it just was this amazing aha moment for me. You had a picture of sort of the eastern seaboard, and the Bull Run Mountain was this wonderful black spot. And I don't know if it was you that was speaking or who it was, but they were saying how that the Bull Run Mountains are a very, very important landmark for the migratory birds, and it was just such a clear black spot in the middle of this horribly lit up thing with dulles and everything else, and that's really what made me so interested in all this.
And that has probably changed, right, with increasing development and increasing lighting. It's ever shrinking, but yes, those places we have to protect them. Yes.
So, in Walker County, we do have a lighting ordinance, and it's not a bad one, but again, enforcement is nil. If you see a problem with lighting, you report it to the county, it goes to the zoning administrator. My question is how, when I go to talk to our supervisor, how do I convince him that we need to do more? We need to have some sort of mechanism to the word incentivize is the same as regulate to me. So how do you provide incentives for taking action and maybe doing things a different way? Having a stronger regulatory process for building permits, so forth, to get better lighting.
Well, thank you. I think you could take them on a driving tour and see if they think the lighting ordinance is working. Again, it's outdated. I meant to review it today, and I meant to print it out and have it with me. It was a relatively strong lighting ordinance at the time, and it was based off of Fairfax counties, but does Fairfax lighting ordinance work? And they have since strengthened theirs, and it's still not good enough. I would say, like, if you would get them to go on a driving tour at night, and even during the day, it's very obvious. I mean, there are lights that are angled, there are lights that are straight up. Frankly, the lights in Marshall that they installed, no. That should never have been.
I've been harping on that for years.
I tried. no one wanted to listen. So I think that it's like, why have an ordinance if it's not going to accomplish the intended goal, right? Which it clearly has not done. You can see it for yourself. You can see it from those, from those maps. And so I know that there has been lighting that's gone in that has complied, and I've had conversations with Julie Wildhouse at PEC in the past about this, and it depends on the point of installation, but then people just do what they want, right? Past that permitting phase, you see a lot of lights that just pop up seemingly on their own. I drive up and down 17 many, many times, and to me, it looks like 50% of the lighting is probably non-compliant. And then there's the light level. It's like, it's not just looking at that fixture. It's what are the illumination levels. I mean, the light by the gas station in Marshall, I have a picture of it somewhere, taken during the day, and it was this blue-white, glaring, insane thing. So I think, it depends on the individual you're trying to persuade, how they're persuaded, but I do think that personal experience and how do they Do they find it aesthetic? You know, how does this benefit the community? And I think historic areas, you know, that can be an easier case to make, or downtowns, but that's a relationship building thing, but I think looking at that ordinance, actually reading the ordinance, and, you know, saying, do you really think this has kept pace with the times? And everyone else is updating them. Using Vienna as an example is really helpful. And when you go to the town of Vienna, Plant and Associates, there is a link to the presentation that they gave. And their storyboards or their information boards or whatever are also on that town of Vienna site. And then there are the templates. So you can also look at the templates, and they're helpful videos, and you do have to download them. You have to agree to. There's a little agreement that you technically have to digitally sign, but it's quick. And say, well, how does this levy ordinance compare to this template? And you know, what do we need to improve on?
Can a town as small as the Plains be, say Darksky,
The town of the Plains could pursue a dark sky community status. That would be really exciting. And it's funny because when I was coming into town, I'm always looking. What if they, you know, like I go through Upperville, and I'm like, I still know how to dress your so good. So they like, don't let them mess with your lives. Yes, and you can look, like, you can email me and I can send you the link, but you can look at the criteria to become a dark sky. And it's process, but that would be really cool. I think it's actually a very suitable size. You can imagine it gets harder the bigger you get.
So I think one thing that might be helpful is, this is a fantastic presentation, thank you very, very much. I know when I moved here, I could see the Milky Way. I haven't been able to see it in years, and it's really heartbreaking. So I'm, thinking as I thought my house was pretty together. It's not. I'm going to go around tomorrow and look at everything. But when I go down to buy new light bulbs, I'm not really clear exactly what I'm looking for.
Sure.
Where would I find that kind of guidance?
So you can go on the Dark Sky website and go to what we do, Dark Sky approved lighting, and pick residential lighting and see examples that, here's the thing, a light might carry the Dark Sky International Dark Sky approved seal, right? But it's possible that it meets that criteria, but it doesn't have the seal. Like the company has to submit, an application for that seal of approval. So there could be good lighting out there, that doesn't necessarily that doesn't necessarily carry a Dark Sky approved seal. However, in general, you're looking at a fixture where you don't see the source of the light. So the typical glass and brass look, where they're like, it's just glass and you see the bulb, that's no good. So, you're looking for something where the light source is recessed into, say, the top of the fixture, and that's opaque. The old rules, we see the light, not the source. You want to see the illumination from the light, but you don't want to see the source of the light itself. You don't want to be staring directly into the light source. You would look at the color temperature. So again, the 3,000 Kelvin or below, warm light. I'm not, the funny thing is, like, I probably know surprise, I do not, like, we so rarely turn on our porch light, we sometimes do, and it's the light that was on the house when we bought the house, and it's, like, technically not compliant, but it is opaque, it's kind of like a low lantern thing, but it's hardly ever on. And I put, a low, like, 40 to 60, now, this is, converting LED to watts is a whole other category. It's very complicated because you can't really do it, but it's like a 40-watt bulb or a 60-watt bulb. It's that low, and it perfectly illuminates our porch. So that's kind of the basics, but the key thing is just not using it except when you need it.
I have the motion detector lights, but I want to know when the light goes on, what exactly, those numbers, what am I exactly looking for? I mean, it's going to go on when there's something out there.
Well, I don't have a number. It's just, first first of all, again, you don't want a bare exposed floodlight, so is this shielded in? It might be more helpful if, like, if you send me an email, I can send you some links, but, or if you can send me a picture of the light in question, but, I'm trying to, I'm looking around, trying to come up with an example, but it's just about a shield covering the light, right, or, the light source being recessed into the housing, the top of the light, so you're not looking at the source of the light, you're not staring into the bulb. Angle targeted down, that's another really, you're not going to shine it directly out, you want it down so that it's only illuminating what you intend to illuminate, like porch or walkway. The warm color, again, no higher Kelvin than 3000. And then, try it out. I mean, one of the most important things is like turn on the lights and go outside and give yourself half an hour for your eyes to adjust and see what it looks like, right? And how does it feel? And walk a distance from your house and see, what that's like. I can guarantee that the people who live across the street from us probably don't realize that their exterior lights shine into our house from hundreds of feet away. And no, it's not a situation where I can talk to them. So that's, that is always a key test.
I'm involved in the Darksky project in Montana, and the most important thing is that the fixture has a top on it that casts only down, and then the secret is to get a light bulb that is small enough that, or especially if it can be mounted from the top so that it doesn't become lower than the light shade.
Right, so it's not protruding.
Yeah, and then that way it's pretty much done in one.
Right.
And there are companies out there that are now selling this, some downcast shades.
Right.
And they're reasonable.
Yes, it doesn't have to be really costly. Yes.
We've done our whole little village, and it's
Right.
almost 100% now.
That's
The other thing I found is that there are things you put along the sidewalk that are charged by solar sunlight, and they go on when somebody walks toward them, so you have night lighting without the overhead.
And that's an adaptive control thing, so it's responsive and dynamic like that. Yeah. What town is that?
In a town called Silver Bay, and the neighboring town is Cook City. And I saw one of those maps like you were talking about, the mountains being dark. Our whole area is dark. Park is working on a Darksky project, and behind that ground is wilderness. And here were our two little villages, and I was like, we're going to fix that. It was awesome.
Yes.
I know a lot of thought was put into the outdoor lighting here at the church, so we can all go out and grade it on the way out.
I love it. I know I pulled in and I was like, it's so rare to go someplace and see that. That was just really amazing. And then don't forget about the dark campus policy. If anybody wants to tackle the Blackbeard County schools, again, Culpeper can do it. It's a next door neighbor. It's not like it's Massachusetts or something.
Thank you. Everybody give her a round of applause.